My husband said he's planning to take a gaycation in Ibiza to experience what it's like to be on the receiving end of another man's baseball bat, but I told him that if he's batting for the other team, this marriage is over. Posted by u/throw_ra_canning 1900. Hi there, I really wish I didn't have to make this post, but here goes. So, me, 42F, and my husband, 42M, have been happily married for about 16 years, give or take. We both have stable careers, a good family life, and are fairly fortunate despite the cost of living hitting the UK hard right now. We have 2 boys, 15 and 10, and up until this Sunday, I thought we had it pretty good. We argue sometimes, of course, but it's never gotten too bad. We also have a pretty decent bedroom life with some exploration, but I won't get into that. The long and short of it is, on Sunday, just after I dropped our boys off at their friend's house, my husband asked me if we had the house to ourselves and, more importantly, if I had a minute. I said yes, and he sat me down, then pulled out a printed poster for some sort of explicit male group gathering and started explaining the concept of a gaycation. He said it's where straight men go somewhere with sun, sand, and booze and become gay for the duration of the trip. According to him, it doesn't actually count because what happens on the gaycation, stays on the gaycation. I was completely silent and mortified, even more so when he said he was looking into booking a trip to Ibiza next year with his brother-in-law, his sister's husband, 35M, to experience it for himself. When he finally let me speak, I just said that I needed him to be clear with me, is he gay? Because if he is, that's okay, but we need to figure out what happens going forward. I didn't let myself get angry or upset, I was just, for a lack of a better word, stunned. He swore up and down that he's not gay, that he's 100% attracted to women, and that, of course, he still loves me and our boys. So I asked if he thought he might be bi, and he got very defensive, saying I needed to drop the accusations. He went on about how the beauty of the gaycation is that it allows straight men to experience gayness without actually being gay, and he compared it to going to an aquarium, WTF. And again, he was adamant that he doesn't find men's bodies or private parts exciting at all, but he still feels he needs to experience this, apparently. I told him I wasn't comfortable with it because, even if he were bi, this would explicitly be cheating on me. He got angry and reiterated that it wasn't cheating because that's the beauty of the gaycation, and so on. At that point, I'd had enough and left the room. I ignored him for the rest of the day, but we spoke at tea. I asked him again why he wanted to do this so badly if he's not gay. He said he was curious about how gay men's lives differ from straight men's and that, unfortunately, once the gaycation begins, it's simply impossible for a man to resist. That a man must surrender himself mind, body, and soul to the gaycation or be destroyed. I can't put into words how surreal it was because he was speaking so matter-of-factly. He said again that this is something straight men do all the time and even said he's actually doing it a bit late. I told him that if he has any love for me, he can't go ahead with this, and that if he does, our marriage will be over. We didn't speak anymore after that. Since then, he hasn't mentioned it again, but somehow, and this is what scares me the most, it genuinely seems like that decision is tearing him up. He didn't go into work on Monday, and only went in for half a day yesterday, because he told them he felt too ill. Every time I see him, he just looks distraught. I really don't think he's wholly gay, though I can absolutely believe he might be bi. But I'd much rather we talked about that in a healthy and open way instead of this incredibly strange denialism centered around going on a sex holiday to Ibiza. Has anyone ever known straight guys to do something like this and then come back and just go back to being straight? Surely that can't actually be a thing that happens. I feel so out of my depth here, and I have no idea how to even initiate the conversation. For the record, I also haven't mentioned any of this to his sister yet, I wouldn't even know how to begin to break it to her. Thanks for any help. Just being able to get this out there has helped, even if only a little. Edit. Wow, this really blew up. It's been incredibly sobering, and I think I've now confirmed what I already knew deep down, the marriage is dead, one way or another. In a way, I guess I was in denial about that myself. I've contacted my sister-in-law, and at first, she screamed at me, called me a liar, and even insinuated that I was trying to steal her husband. Shortly after, she rang me back, apologized, and admitted she was in deep shock. I've asked my parents to look after the boys, and we're going to meet tomorrow to discuss this further. I've also texted my husband and told him he needs to make alternative accommodation arrangements, he will not be sleeping here tonight, and a bag will be waiting for him. Thank you to everyone for the kind words, especially Champion Flight, who gave me the dose of reality I really needed. Also, I see a lot of people asking about the aquarium analogy, and at the risk of doxing myself, there's a pretty famous aquarium in the UK called the Deep. At the very end, you walk through a tunnel that goes underneath the main fish tank, so it's quite immersive, I suppose. My husband explained the aquarium thing like this: it's a bit like visiting that tunnel. You go there to observe the fish, and you even get up close, but you never actually enter the water, get emotionally invested, or become a fish, gay, so it supposedly doesn't count. It was a very bizarre analogy. I pointed out that it still doesn't make sense, and he just got more huffy, saying that I don't get it. And, frankly, I still don't. Update 1 day later. So, when I last posted, I had contacted my husband to tell him he wouldn't be staying at home tonight and that a bag would be waiting for him. As you can imagine, we argued, quite badly. I won't go into the specific details, but now I'm 100% convinced that, at a minimum, he's bi and might even be fully gay. We've had arguments in the past, but I've genuinely never seen him have such a childish tantrum before, screaming about how I just don't understand the gaycation. I absolutely despise that phrase now, and insinuating that I'm actually homophobic because I refuse to allow him to participate in this cultural exchange with the gay community. A lot of you suggested asking him if it would be acceptable if the roles were reversed, so I did. I asked if it would be okay for me to go and sleep with other guys during that week. Like clockwork, he became very angry and offended, saying it was completely different because a gaycation means nothing, and what happens on the gaycation stays on the gaycation, so it doesn't actually count. Meanwhile, he claimed I'd just be straight up cheating. Well, I turned it around on him. No, but you see, what happens in Manchester stays in Manchester. It doesn't mean anything, it doesn't count. It's like birdwatching. And I think it got through to him? He went quiet, then started crying, admitting that the thought of me sleeping with another man was destroying his heart. But, according to him, relationships need sacrifices, so he tearfully agreed that when he goes on the gaycation, I'll get 1 week in Manchester to do whatever I want. He said he doesn't want me to, but that it's fair in a twisted way, he supposed. I told him to get out of my house. Thankfully, he left without a fight. I know it's incredibly petty, but I also drained the joint bank account, legal in the UK, so he couldn't try to use it against me. About an hour later, I got a call from his mum, my mother-in-law, who just screamed and screamed at me, calling me a cheating whore, telling me I was horrible, asking what about the kids, etc. When I finally regained my composure, I just said, ask your son about the gaycation. At first, she got even angrier, but I told her to just ask him about the gaycation, he'd explain. She called me a effing joke and hung up. Later in the evening, I got another call from her, and this time she was in floods of tears. She was very apologetic, and I told her she didn't need to be the one to apologize. She was so upset that she handed the phone to my father-in-law. While he sounded calm, I could just tell he was absolutely on the warpath. Again, my father-in-law was very apologetic and said he overheard the phrase, asked my husband about it, and at first, my husband brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Then he explained it as a modern thing men do, giving them the same spiel about how what happens on the gaycation stays on the gaycation, how men cannot resist the gaycation, and how a man must surrender to the gaycation, etc. My father-in-law said they told him to leave or they'd call the police. They didn't care where he went, but he wasn't staying there. My husband tried to call me while I was still on the phone with his dad, but I just ignored it. My father-in-law apologized again, said he was so sorry for me, and assured me they were on my side in this. So that's something. I told them to be there for their daughter, because it sounds like my brother-in-law might also be involved, though my husband didn't tell them that part. My father-in-law just said he had to go because he was so angry. After the phone call, I got a text from my husband, which was weirdly rambly. He accused me of abusing the gaycation to destroy his marriage and his life and once again insinuated that I and his parents were homophobic for doing such a thing. I told him we'd talk when he grows up and then blocked his number. I took a day off work to have the locks changed this morning, so that's £500 gone, but whatever. At least I know he won't be coming back. I'm going to start looking into how to proceed with a divorce and from there, we'll move forward. Oh, of course, there's also the brother-in-law. I haven't yet met with my sister-in-law, she's in such a state and has taken this far worse than I have, for reasons that'll be clear soon. We're maybe going to try meeting tomorrow, but we did talk over the phone. During the call, I eavesdropped on her conversation with her husband by staying on mute while she put her phone on speaker. Her husband had just gotten home earlier, she made him come home, telling him there was an emergency. She simply asked him, "Can you please explain what a gaycation is?" She told me afterward that she was praying he'd look confused or just say, "What are you talking about?" or anything along those lines. But instead, he sat her down and explained that a gaycation is a new thing where straight men go to gay hotspots and participate in gay intimate acts, but it doesn't count because there's no investment, and what happens on the gaycation stays on the gaycation. He even compared it to writing down angry thoughts and putting them in a drawer, you never have to see them again. The whole time, my sister-in-law was in tears as he calmly brushed off the same points my husband did, about how it doesn't count and even repeating the whole "it's impossible to resist, you must surrender or be destroyed" nonsense. Honestly, I'm starting to think they must be talking to a effed up MLM or something, because I can't imagine either of them coming up with this on their own. I really don't want to go into what was discussed, for her sake, but it became painfully apparent that my brother-in-law is into sissy hypno stuff and, at times, conflated that with the whole concept of a gaycation. There was this utterly surreal moment where my sister-in-law, in floods of tears and trying to wrap her head around all of this, listened as he explained, so genuinely, so matter-of-factly, that for most men, the gaycation is either a one-time or annual thing, but some men go on the gaycation for years, and others never return because they use hypnosis and mind control to be totally feminized into a state of permanent pseudo-gayness. In disbelief, she said, "Surely if you're taking it up the rear willingly because you want to, that makes you gay," and he replied, "No, because that's the beauty of the gaycation, you can do all this gay stuff but don't interact with the wider gay life experience." She then asked if the sissy stuff was what he wanted, and he said, "Not on a long-term basis," but was adamant that this is something all straight men do, and added that she wouldn't understand because she's a woman. Then there were more insinuations of homophobia. Well, that marriage is dead too, I suppose. The whole ordeal ended when she told him he had a choice to make, and he responded that he didn't need to make a choice because the beauty of the gaycation is that it allows him to keep his marriage since it doesn't count. She clarified that wasn't the choice, that the choice was whether he was leaving the house that night or she was. The only good thing he did was leave. Afterward, my sister-in-law and I spoke, and I'm still utterly stunned. She's gone to her parents for support, which I completely understand. What exactly did we do to have our lives destroyed in such an abrupt, bizarre, and embarrassing way? Following some advice, I'm going to start looking at devices and bank statements to see if I can find any definitive proof of cheating. After that, I suppose I'll have to figure out how to explain to my boys why their father won't be coming home. Edit. I spoke to my other sister-in-law, my husband's older sister, and gave her a skimmed-down version of what's been happening. She asked her husband about it, and thankfully, he was deeply confused. However, he then mentioned that about 2 years ago, at a birthday party, my husband and brother-in-law approached him about signing up for some online boot camp around BDSM and cross-dressing. He assumed they were taking the piss, told them to screw off, and never really thought about it again. The fact that this has been going on for that long is making me want to throw up. Also, for the person who mentioned divorce options, I'm definitely going to look into adultery because, plain and simple, that's exactly what this is. Commenter. Your husband and brother-in-law are deeply entrenched in a shared delusion that has already destroyed 2 families. Their identical talking points about surrender and destruction make it clear that this was coordinated. They aren't just planning to cheat, they're already involved in some online community that has warped their thinking. The fact that they both immediately launched into the same script about gaycation shows this isn't spontaneous. You were absolutely right to drain the account and change the locks. Their attempts to twist this into accusations of homophobia only highlight how desperately they're trying to avoid accountability. The identical language, the bizarre aquarium and birdwatching analogies, and the talk of surrender or be destroyed make it obvious they're trapped in an online echo chamber completely detached from reality. When your husband agreed to let you have a Manchester week while crying, he exposed the entire lie. He knows exactly what this is, cheating, he just wants your permission to do it while denying you the same. The references to hypnosis and permanent feminization show just how extreme this has become. Get a lawyer, protect your assets, and document everything. This situation is likely to worsen before it improves. Focus on protecting yourself and your children, as they're too lost in their shared fantasy to recognize the destruction they're causing. What a pathetic hill for 2 men to choose to end on. They've destroyed their marriages, traumatized their families, and alienated their parents, all while insisting none of it counts because they've invented special rules to justify it. They want to cheat without consequences, and they found an online community to validate this delusion.